Team lists are in, and that means a big news for NRL fantasy. We've got some massive dropping, some guys included, and I thought we might see Piakura into the team, but unfortunately, we have been baited and switched. Welcome back, guys, to the Casual Athlete live stream for Team List Tuesday. We're looking at round 3, and this is one of the biggest rounds for trades of the year. You've got to know it because there are some great players with low and high break evens. We've got to target them at the right time, build that cash, score some points, and get through this. Now, let's jump into team lists here first, and I'll jump into some questions too. So first up, first game of the round, we got the Storm and the Panthers grand final match. This should be an app cracker in real life. I'll tell you what, Penrith will be hurting after last week. I wouldn't write them off in this game. I think they'll be feeling it after last week, and they'll rock up with their absolute best in this one. Saying that, my tip is still probably going to be for the Storm to win this. They were just too good in round 1. They've had a week of preparation. They'll be sweet. Now, team list here, we've got Pappenhausen at fullback. We've got Anderson and Coates on the wings, Howarth and Meany at center. Then we have Cam Munster, Jerome Hughes in the halves. Rolling through to the forward pack, Tokamanu and King in the front row spots, Harry Grant at hooker, Sean Blaw, Eli Katoa in the back row, and Trent Loiero at lock. Then the interchange, Wishart, McDonald, Kamika Mika, and Lazarus Valepu. Now, this Storm side's pretty settled, but I do notice Grant Anderson popping up here. Obviously, no Warbrick in this one. I wouldn't freak out too much about that sort of change. Wouldn't be chasing Grant Anderson. He's not a great fantasy scorer. Pretty good player in real life, can score a try, but not a lot of base there. In terms of Pappenhausen, he's one that you could look at. So he's a bit of a pod that has been floated, and I've had a few people sort of mentioning him. It probably is a good time actually to mention too. We've got a new producer on the show, Monty from Quickfire Fantasy. I'm just going to pop him up here too, because he is a bit of a Paps lover. Hope you're doing well, mate. he's on mute, but if you see a bit of chat from the Casual Athlete through this in the chat box there, that's Monty, and he's also helping me out with popping up some of the best questions and comments. So leave your questions on the side too. Now, it might be worth just popping this one up because I do want to talk to Pappenhausen. So Terra on Trent. Thoughts on Pappenhausen? He's one of those guys who he's pretty streaky, right? So he's a fullback, so none of them really have the best base stats. He's no different. But Pappenhausen's one of those guys who can crank out 70, 80 points when he has one of those games like he did in round 1. He was on about 59 at halftime, I believe, in that game. So attacking stats is the big one for Pappenhausen. He's not a goal kicker right now, so I don't expect him to return back to his sort of 50s average. But he could be an interesting option as a pod because he's at that price point. Personally, though, I'd probably be steering in other directions. So I've gone Greg Marzu over Pappenhausen, for example, in my team. I'm enjoying Marzu's scores, but it's hard to buy Marzu before that round 4 buy. You could look at someone like Brimson as well. And I actually think that Brimson, as much as he had a rough first game of the year, he'll figure it out and he'll be close to Pappenhausen too. So I think at that price point, I'm not jumping onto Paps, but he is definitely a pod that you could look at 100%. Now, to go through more of this team here, and then we'll get some questions after that. So for the rest of the back line, look, Jack Howarth is one you've got to consider. He's a good price there. I think it's 478K. So when you look at Jack Howarth, the meters gained, a couple of try assists in that first game, he was absolutely rampaging. Now, it was only a 60-point game for him. So I would temper expectations on him and sort of say, all right, I expect about a 40 average out of Jack Howarth. He is a bit of value, but the value for him really is that you've got a borderline keeper at center in a very good Melbourne Storm side where he's guaranteed to get some quality ball. So Howarth is interesting. If you need a center, he's a good option. And you have to also consider that you'll have a bunch of Knights players out next week. So if you can target him as a buy, then that's a pretty exciting option because when Dylan Lucas is out, Bradman Best, Kalen Ponga, Greg Marzu, he's a guy who can plug into the center spot. In terms of the forward pack here, look, Tokamanu is one we talked about a lot in the preseason. He is going to start slow. The minutes will rise as the year goes on, is my expectation. He's coming to this Storm side. They have very high standards. So I'm guessing Bellamy is watching him very closely off the ball and wants him doing those little 1%ers right. He's one that I'll have an eye on in sort of 4 to 5 weeks' time. But for now, you're steering clear. And then we jump to Harry Grant, guy on my team right now. It was a tough one to swallow, going Grant over Connor Watson. Look, Watson's not going to score 2 tries every week. I expect Grant to have his share of those sorts of games too. So I'm sticking with Harry Grant still. I think that he's priced in that sort of mid-50s area. He is not going to go down from there. Like if we look at Harry Grant across the macro, so before Origin, that next sort of 10 weeks or so, he's not going to average below, sort of 54, 55, which is very priced right now. And he has a good chance of moving up to that 60, 61, 62 area if he can light things up. Now, we saw in this very matchup, Connor Watson grabbed 2 tries last week through the middle. Some of that time he was playing at lock, so you can't read into it too much. But there are holes to be exposed in this Penrith middle forward rotation without Fisher Harris, and I'm hoping Harry Grant can be a big part of taking that. Another one I want to mention here too is Cam Munster at 6. Yeah, we gotta think about that, right? So I've got Munster on my side. He's had his bye now. If you need a player at that price point, he's a guy who can absolutely go nuclear. And this game against Penrith is going to bring out the best of him. So I'm expecting a good score from him. And for the rest of the forward pack, I've had a few people ask me about Eli Katoa. I reckon he's pretty expensive. Like he's sort of in that low 50s area already for price. He relies on big attacking plays, which he can string together, but he also has some quiet games in him. So personally, I wouldn't jump on him at this price. But if you like him, and you can get on that. Now for the Panthers, and then we'll go to some questions. So for the Penrith side, we've got Dane Laurie at fullback, which we expected. Casey McLean, Brian Toe on the wing spots, Isaac Tungo, Paul Alamoni center, Jack Cole, Nathan Cleary. Good to see that Jack Cole keeps his spot for us who have him. We're definitely not going to be starting him this week after that performance last round, but at least he can stay in and hopefully, put together a couple of attacking plays and make us some cash. Then for the forward pack here, Leota and Smith in the front row spots. Mitch Kenny. We've got Sorensen, Martin, and Yo in the back row. Brad Schneider, Papali'i, Henry, and Garner on the bench. So a pretty minute-heavy bench there as well, particularly with Papali'i and Henry. They're going to steal some minutes from the front rowers at the starting team. So for this team here, look, Dane Laurie would be very interesting if it was a longer period of time. It's 2 to 3 weeks without Dylan Edwards. So it's not enough time. If you are in a draft league, Laurie's a guy that you should definitely be picking up off the waivers. He should bump out about a 45 average while Dylan Edwards is out, but it's not enough time for me to make a move on him, my classic team. Jack Cole should be on the bottom of your bench. It was just too rough. I mean, maybe he bounces back this week. We don't know what's going to happen, but I think this game against the Storm is one where you can pretty safely say he should be contained unless he can grab a try. Then for Nathan Cleary, look, it's a matchup against the Storm where they're not expected to win. So we may see Nathan Cleary really, really take control in this one. Cleary is probably going to be my captain this week. I'm probably sticking with Nathan Cleary. The thing with Cleary is he has that potential to go 120 plus that most of the other captain options don't have. So when I'm targeting the captain, right, if you go with Nathan Cleary and you cop that 56, that 63, maybe the odd 70, another 60, whatever it is, and then he pumps out 125 at some point, that just bumps the average up 10 to 15 points. So I'm riding the wave there with that 125 potential. I think he could step up against the Storm. I don't think he's going to pump out 125 this week, but I'm sticking with Nathan Cleary as my captain going forward. Saying that, if you do have Payne Haas, he scored an 81 and 85. The only attacking stats he's had are, obviously offloads and tackle breaks, but one try assist there. So if he cracks out a try against the Cowboys, could be something interesting. But the minutes are a bit risky with Haas. Like he should have a couple of quiet games at some point this year as well with those minutes. But I will say Haas is definitely a target for trades. He's definitely going to be in the buyers segment. It's just as a captain, you almost have to stick with him long term and cop a couple of those for the explosion games too. So big fan of Haas. I'm going to throw across 2 questions from producer Monty. So let's see what we got here. Cole, a sell now with Schneider on the bench. No, I would stick with Cole. Hold Cole just in case he can sort of fluke a couple of attacking plays. Otherwise, yeah, obviously we're not going to start him, but definitely sit him on the bottom of your bench. Thoughts on Hosking to Howarth? Yeah, this is a fine trade. So look at your Knights players who are going to be out next week. You might need a bit of depth in the back line. Howarth provides a lot of depth. He's at a good price point. He should progressively make cash, and he's a solid guy you can keep at your center spot throughout the year. Does Stefano bounce back and play some decent minutes this week? I wouldn't expect it to happen this week. So I think he's going to gradually increase in minutes as the year goes on. But I think that sort of Melbourne system, we saw Tariq Sims go there, for example, and never really get the minutes. We've seen quite a few players go to Melbourne and not get the role they were used to in previous clubs. So I'm guessing Stefano is being held to a bit of a higher standard off the ball and in those little 1%ers. And that's what he's going to be focusing on, maintaining that intensity. And Bellamy will be watching him very closely. But I would say more like round 5, round 6. That's when we can look at him. And then is Dane Laurie by? 2 to 3 weeks, not enough time. So for me, he's not. But he's kind of like Wishart last year, where if he gets an extended opportunity and there are injuries we don't foresee, then he could absolutely just make more cash than we're expecting and come out and sort of surprise everyone. And then Blore and Katoa worth something. Yeah, probably not jumping on those two. Blore could be value. Katoa could bump up as well. It depends what you think of the Storm. Personally, I don't think they're worth the trade. And that's us for questions there. So I'm going to roll through to the next game here. In fact, I'll just answer one more here. Pap and Nicholson. Nicholson is the one I'm prioritizing over Pappenhausen this week. But have a look at your roster construction because you need to cover positions, right? So you need to look at how many Newcastle players you have out next week and covering your backline because there's going to be a lot of teams that make the mistake where they don't have a full backline next week because they haven't thought about this. So that's the key focus for me. All right, going through to the Warriors and the Roosters, and this should be a cracker. So two teams who were not expected to win last week, both came out and beat good sides, right? So the Warriors got Manly done. And Manly were, competition favorites after that round one performance, and the Warriors came out and spanked them. And the Panthers looked unbeatable as well, and then the Roosters put 38 points on them. So I'm keen to see which one of these teams really rocks up in this game. I think the fact that it's in New Zealand makes me think New Zealand will probably step up and win this one. But then you have a look at the Roosters, and they've had a few nice inclusions. So Victor Radley's back, Spencer Lenu's back, Lindsay Collins is back as well. Now we'll go through the Warriors first, then we'll go to the Roosters, and then we'll touch on some questions. And as I'm talking through the Warriors too, Monty, feel free to pop up any Warriors questions about players that I'm talking about as well. But for the backline here, we got Charles Clockstad at fullback. You have Tuapiki and RTS, one of the most dynamic winger combos in the game on the wings. Ali Leotawa, Adam Pompey, two big units there. Chanel Harris Tavita and Luke Metcalf in the halves. And I'll talk about the back line here first before going to the forwards. So, I mean, if you're considering some options here in the back line, they're probably more draft relevant, most of these guys. I'll talk about Luke Metcalf here. So Metcalf pumped out a low 60s score last week, which is absolutely fantastic. We talked about him as a hold last week, but you had to get Humphreys. So a lot of us did sell him for Humphreys, including me. Look, I'm looking at Luke Metcalf, and that 64 included a try assist. That was a bit of a ceiling game for him, where he can go a bit higher than that, but that was an everything going right sort of game for Luke Metcalf. So I do like the kick meters, but I wouldn't be breaking my team to go and buy Luke Metcalf. Saying that, the Roosters are a team who have leaked some points recently, and I believe the Warriors have the Tigers or someone similar who can leak some points next week as well before they have a bye in round 5. So Metcalf should light it up, and if it works for your team, it works for your team. But personally, I'd be steering away from buying Metcalf because you probably don't need half cover. You probably need center, forward, and wing fullback cover instead. So Metcalf, great. If you held him, awesome. But if you don't have him, I'm probably not jumping on. For the forward, just a quick question here. Should I keep Roger or try to upgrade him to someone like Ponga? Ooh, I mean, Roger has a couple of good fixtures coming up. Ponga has the bye in round 4. I'd probably, if you can make the move to Ponga this week and it makes sense for your team, I'd make that move, but don't destroy your team to do it. So if it's not so easy for you to do, I'd stick with Roger for 2 more weeks, wait till after Ponga's bye, and Roger has the bye in round 5. Ponga has it in round 4. The following round 4, you make that trade and you skip Roger Tuivasa-Sheck's bye. That's what I'd do there. Then for the forward pack here, we got James Fisher-Harris, Wade Egan, Mitch Barnett. We have Luke Catewell, Marata Niokore, and Aaron Clark in the back row. And then on the interchange, Dylan Walker, we got Ford, Valmaga, and Halasima there as well. So for the forward pack here, look, Fisher-Harris is one I want to talk about. He pumped out about 58 minutes last week. I believe it was 57 points for him. So about a PPM, moving up towards that 60-minute mark. The prior week, it was 46 minutes, 51 points. So you go from 46 minutes to about 58 minutes, which is a pretty clear trend that we can't ignore. You also see the Warriors winning when they do that too, which is what we expected. Barnett, I will comment on here as well. Barnett went from about, I believe it's 51 minutes in round 1 to about 61 in round 2. So his minutes bumped up too, but Fisher-Harris copped the bigger bump there. So we expected to see those guys increase in minutes. Barnett didn't convert his minutes to points. Fisher-Harris did. Now, for Fisher-Harris, you could make a case that he's a buy option. Like if he's going to get 60 minutes, he's going to score in the high 50s. He's priced at about that 600K mark. You could do a lot worse. I'm going to look into him a bit more, but you could do a lot worse than getting on Fisher-Harris. For Ulu here, we've got, is Barnett a hold? And for that question, 40 points in 60 minutes isn't great. Look, Barnett, if you can move him for Payne Haas, or you can move him for someone else that's really worth it, I think you have to do it. And Barnett is pretty close to Payne Haas in price. So if you could go, say, if you could sell Mitch Barnett and Zach Hosking and buy, Matty Nicholson and Payne Haas, you're in a great spot. I will caveat to I haven't seen the Canberra team list, so I'm assuming Matty Nicholson's starting on the edge. But yeah, that I'd be definitely open to selling Barnett. For the Roosters side of the ball here, because I'm not really going to talk too much about Aaron Clark, Capewell, Niokore. I will mention Wade Egan's been in form. You could take a gamble on him, but he's getting a bit expensive now. So if you can do that, you have to do it this week. For The Roosters, we got Tedesco, Tupou, Nawani Tawase, Toya Young. Then we have Sandon Smith and Chad Townsend in the halves. Forward pack here is Lenu back into the team, Connor Watson at hooker. Nafahu White is starting over Lindsay Collins, who's on the bench. Then we have Gus Crichton, Sua Wong, Victor Radley, and Zach Docker-Clay, Fiketti, Steep, and Collins on the bench. Now, for the Chooks, it's good to see if you did get on someone like Blake Steep, who we talked about a bit last week. He is keeping a spot in the team. He pumped out big numbers off the bench. In fact, here we go, Tom. Yeah, thoughts on Steep. He's a machine, right? I considered jumping on last week. I really did consider it and just couldn't bring myself to do it. It didn't work for the loopholes I was trying to do either. He's a bit expensive now, so it's a bit hard. But if you do want a cheapie, look, he's got a lot of hype. And we're seeing the team here, which is pretty close to what they're going to be. I mean, Nat Butcher will come back as well. Egan Butcher, I've heard his recovery is a bit delayed, but he'll come back too. So the issue with Steep is he's not in their full strength side. Like he's a guy who will drop out. I would expect Fiketti to drop out first, but Steep would eventually drop out here too. So I'm probably saying steer clear on Steep, but at the same time, if he does manage to keep a spot and they have more injuries, he could absolutely fire off because he is a monster. Now, what do I think White's minutes will be like? It's going to drop off a bit, right? So Lindsay Collins, he's back this week. He'll eat up some minutes there. Spencer Lenu's back as well. I would say Nafahu White, 58 minutes last week. It's not going to be a repeat of that. I would predict maybe sort of 50 minutes, 44 points. And when Nafahu White plays big minutes, that 50 minutes, 44 points is what he typically averages. So, yeah, I would say you pencil him in for sort of low 40s to mid 40s this week in terms of points production for Nafahu White. I'll talk about a few other guys here. So Connor Watson pumped out that 90 last week. Look, 2 tries in that. The 2 tries are what took that from sort of a 50 to 55 score up to a 90 score. But Connor Watson's capable of attacking plays, and we're looking at him up against the Warriors side who can leak some points as well. So if you're on Connor Watson, just ride that wave. If you don't have Connor Watson, though, he's priced at a 54 this week, right? So really the question you're asking yourself is, do I see Connor Watson averaging 60 plus? Because that's kind of what it's got to be for you to jump on him and be worth the trade. For me, probably not a 60 plus average. I think he could definitely pump out that sort of high 50s average. You know, he could be worth a trade if your roster needs a hooker. But if you don't need a hooker, if you've got a couple of hookers already, you've got cover in the middle forward spots, then I'm probably not desperate to jump on him. I'm not breaking my team to jump on. But if it suits your team, you can definitely buy him. He is a really hot option. And just for you, B, how big a priority is he? Is trading Yo for Watson an option? I think it's a bit trade ragey, but look, Monty from Quickfire and I are going to be jumping onto a video after this. We're going to do an analysis of Isaiah Yo and Payne Haas. So we'll break all those numbers down. Make sure you keep an eye out for that because that's going to be a deep dive on Isaiah Yo's stats and how they've changed this year. Now, for the rest of the Roosters team here, Sua Wong is one that I think is really interesting. So he's priced around that 400K mark. I'd love to know how long Nat Butcher's out for. That's my big concern there. But if Sua Wong can lock in that edge back row spot, he'll probably get a rest from Fiketti potentially or from Radley moving to the edge. Like, I doubt he plays 80 minutes, but he's still an interesting option just around that 400K mark. So I'm not totally against Sua Wong. We'll go into it deeper in the buy, hold, sell segment, but seeing him starting again and named on the edge is very, very encouraging. Any other questions here for us, Monty? Is Metcalf a buy? I can straight swap Duffy for Metcalf, but do I go for another cheapie instead of Metcalf? It's not a bad option going Duffy to Metcalf. There are other cheapies as well, so we'll do it in our buy, hold, sell. There's a cheapies section where we talk about cheapies. Monty and I are doing a video on cheapies as well, so keep an eye out for that. But Metcalf is one option you can consider. He's got some good fixtures here. Not a bad option. If you need a half, he's a good one. Just keep an eye on next week and see if, when those Knights players are on a buy, if you'll have enough centers and wing fullbacks. Wong to play 80 again. Yeah, Karina, I'm not sure about that. Potentially, but I don't expect him to when they're back at full strength, right? So I would say probably 60, 65 minutes here for maybe a 40-point score, high 30s, probably 40. But yeah, I would say less than 80 minutes is my expectation. And if not this week, then next week. Is Lenu a buy? Absolutely not. Skip Spencer Lenu. I'm not a fan at all. And then so White, but so Wong. These puns are never not funny, by the way. So yeah, I'm always here for those. Let's get rolling through these teams. So what do we got next? We got Broncos and the Cowboys. And this is historically one of the best games going around. I'm not a Queenslander, but I'll tell you what, this Queensland derby is always an absolute belter. So for the Broncos and the Cowboys, Broncos side of the ball, we got Reece Walsh in, fresh off a -2 score. Get your Reece Walsh questions in right now because I've got a lot of opinions here. Then Selwyn Cobbo, Jesse Arthur's on the wings, Mariner and Shibasaki at the center spots. We've got Ben Hunt, Adam Reynolds in the halves. Forward pack, we got Carrigan and Payne Haas at prop, Corey Pakes at hooker. Jack Jezewski gets a start over Pierre Kura. Bit of word that Jezewski was training with the reserves this week, so that might change later closer to the game. Just keep an eye on that. But Jezewski is currently starting with Jordan Ricky in the back row, Kobe Hetherington at lock, and then we have Walters, Jensen, Willison, and Pierre Kura on the bench. Now, for this team here, I mean, there's a good question that popped up here. Is Jesse Arthur's a buy? It's a hard one to recommend. He's made a lot of cash so far. Look, Jesse Arthurs he's sort of fallen into a couple of really nice attacking plays, and a lot of the attacking stats have kind of come his way. So for Jesse Arthurs, I would say probably not a buy. Historically, not a great average, but they do have a great run of fixtures. So he could just keep on tinning up these massive scores. For me, though, I'm going to say no to him as a buy. I just don't think he's going to make the money worth to make him worthwhile as a buy. But at the same time, this Cowboys team is pretty light, and they lose Braden Burns on the edge as well, which is another one. So you could get a lot of results out of it. So I'm going to say objective answer is no. But if you really believe in the Broncos and look at the fixtures and really like them, then you can absolutely do that. For Reece Walsh, I want to talk about him here too. And I'll just throw this one up as well, just because, sorry, Monty, to see your thunder. I'm seeing a few of them. But Walsh, I don't love his fixtures. Reason why I got him. But come on, what do I do? So for Reece Walsh, he dropped a ton of cash last week. I believe it was 66K he dropped. Very high break even coming into this week, but not obscene, right? So for Reece Walsh, my plan as a non-owner of Reece Walsh is to look at him very closely next week, because I think he'll score decently in this one. And I think he'll come into that game next week up against the Dolphins and be primed to absolutely tear up. Now, for you, Daz, as a Walsh owner, if there's a really good trade you could make with Walsh and, it's calling out to you and it's there, I wouldn't be against it. But the issue for you is the options I would recommend would be guys like, maybe AJ Brimson, but he's not consistent. There's no rush to go get him. There's, Kalen Ponga, who's on fire, but he's got the buy in round 4, so you're not going to do that right now. Greg Marzu's exactly the same. Like, the wing fullback spot is not super inspiring. It's not like we have Yongi, popping off either. So for mine, I'd say you're probably going to stick with him, right? Because the fixtures are really good. You've already copped the cash loss anyway. So you might as well stick with him. A lot of people are going to sell him. They're going to be frustrated. And you are jumping on him. You love the fixtures. You love this Cowboys matchup. This is one of the matchups that you circled when you bought Reece Walsh. And you said, you know what? I'm licking my lips. He's going to tear the Cowboys to shreds. They haven't been able to defend anything either. So I think you got to hold on to Reece Walsh is my answer there. And as a non-owner, sorry, could you pop that one up again? Yeah. As a non-owner, I would be targeting him next week 100% or the week after, seeing if he looks good. Last week for Haas. Look, you can get Haas anytime, right? So Haas is priced at about a 65 average. For Payne Haas, 65 average is it's high, right? It's very high. It's probably best player in fantasy high. It's what Isaiah Yo in his great year last year averaged. So you're essentially backing him to be, generationally good for fantasy. And so far this year he's looked generationally good. On the field in real life, he's a generational prop as well. So it's not impossible whatsoever, but you really are backing him to average sort of 70 plus. Like that's what you're saying there by buying him at this price. Do I think he'll average 70 plus? Again, that's going to be a part of the video we do on Isaiah Yo and Payne Haas. So there's going to be a deep dive on that coming through tomorrow. But I think, jumping on Payne Haas is a good move right now. The upside is so big. Just be ready that he will score the odd 50 here and there as well. There's going to be some lower games, but I think he's still a must-have. Payne Haas captain is a big call. The issue with Payne Haas captain in this one is you are relying on him racking up some big attacking stats, which is super, super possible, by the way. So we saw, Tafoa Sipley absolutely killed it against the Cowboys, and he's not half the player Payne Haas is. But for Payne Haas captain, look, the risk is that they dominate. He gets subbed out, 45 minutes, 50 minutes into his playing time. Doesn't have those attacking stats. We saw the Cowboys last week up against the Sharks. And the Sharks in this matchup, Adam Fanua-Blake played lower minutes and scored 36 points, right? Destructive ball runner. He's not Payne Haas, but you know what I mean? They found a lot of success on the edges. And every single try last week that was scored by the Sharks was scored on the edges. They didn't score through the middle a single time. So, it's a tough one. You're betting on attacking stats basically with Payne Haas against a Cowboys team that didn't allow attacking stats through the middle last week. So Payne Haas is going to have to migrate to the edges a bit, which we have seen him do this year as well. But you know what I mean? There's a little bit of risk in that. So personally, I'm still steering towards a Nathan Cleary play. There's upside in the Haas play if you want to do it. Any other questions to fire through? I'm holding Walsh. Absolutely agree with that. And then Piakura the GOAT. Piakura to be starting by game time. I'm pretty. I think he subs into the starting team last week. We know who Jack Jezewski is. Piakura. He's in the Origin development squad. He's got to be there. He's our mascot. We need a big score out of him. And then what's very important, Haas on Nicholson. Nicholson's going to generate more cash. So I would say if you can buy one or the other this week, I'd buy Nicholson this week. And I have Walsh, Ponga, and Campbell. Do I panic sell Walsh or hold the trust? You got a pretty good set of wing fullbacks there. Are you weak in another position is my question. So if you can use this trade to buy someone really good in another spot and plug a gap, I don't mind you selling Walsh because your wing fullbacks are so strong. But if you can hold on to him and sort of survive a little bit of a cash loss, the thing with cash drops, right, is you only lose the cash when you sell the player. So if Walsh drops another 30K and then bounces back up, blah, 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 and you sell him later on when he's 750K instead or whatever it is, you didn't actually lose any cash. You just sort of temporarily took a dip and then bounced back up. So I'd lean towards holding Walsh for most people unless you have a game-breaking trade you can make. Now, on the Cowboys side of the ball here, we've got Scotty Drinkwater at fullback, Derby and Taulagi in the wing spots. Purdue keeps his spot, luckily, and Vilea. Then we've got Tommy Dearden. Jake Clifford comes back. Tom Duffy is gone. For the forward pack here, McLean and Taumalolo. We've got Robson at hooker, Bateman, O'Connell, and Cotter. Then we have McIntyre, Nanai, Neem, and Hess. Now, no guarantees at all that this is how they run out on game day. There's a chance that Nanai could slide into the starting team, but it's good to see him back into the team. For Josh here, would you sell Duffy? Yeah, I think you can. I mean, you can give it 1 week if you want to. Maybe it's a 1 week thing where he gets dropped out, but I would expect if they're dropping a rookie half, they're probably not going to bring him back anytime soon. So you could sell Duffy. Thoughts on Bateman? Should I keep on? It's a hard one. He didn't score well last week. Look, I would keep him. Most likely, I would say, yeah. Like the Brisbane edges are not strong. We talked about this all season. They're pretty fragile on the edge, and we saw Matty Nicholson score 2 tries last week, for example. We saw Rob Toya tear up as well. Now Bateman, I'm not guaranteeing he does that whatsoever, but I think the Cowboys will find a bit more luck in attack in this game, and Bateman could potentially pop off. So I'd give Bateman another week if I had him 100%. Then don't need to use a second trade this week. Do I trade Duffy or save a trade? Depends who you're buying. That's a big question, right? So if you can buy someone that's going to make 100K plus or pump out big scores for your team, then I would make the trade. What's your thoughts on Robson? If you have Robson, I'd sell him. If you don't have Robson, I'd watch him because he's getting very cheap. But yeah, he's not of interest right now. And then Derby avoid. It's a hamstring for Braden Burns, right? So that can be longer. I mean, if Braden Burns is out for 4+ weeks, which I haven't got confirmation of yet, then Derby could be an option we look at as a cash out. It's just the Cowboys' wings, they're not that attractive right now. Like it feels like if you buy Derby, you'll have Derby and Purdue. You know what I mean? And it's not that great. And trading Purdue for Derby is very sideways, by the way. So I wouldn't make that move. But yeah, if Burns is out for 4+ weeks, then yeah, Derby's an option. Any other questions for us for the Cowboys? All right, cool. Awesome. Other than that, look, Kai O'Donnell, don't fall into that one. He's not an option to get up. I will mention a couple of guys I've got my eyes on here. So Tom Dearden, Ruben Cotter, they're 2 guys who are getting a bit cheaper in fantasy this week, or this last couple of weeks, right? So at some point, Cotter and Dearden will turn it around. Now, the buy schedule is not good for Origin playing Cowboys players, but they're going to get very cheap. Same as Jeremiah Nanai too. So you could look at targeting some of these guys at a discount in the next sort of 3 to 4 weeks. And then thoughts on keeping 20-man missed tackles. Purdue. Yeah, I would keep Purdue. Purdue's going to have his days. Like he had a few good plays in that game too as well. He's going to have his days where he pops off, has some attacking stats. They play an easier match. It's the middle of the day, like a sunny Sunday afternoon. He scores a hat trick. So Purdue will make you some cash at some point as long as he doesn't get dropped. That is the only risk with Jackson Purdue. Let's keep rolling through here. So we've got a game with the Sharks and the Rabbitohs up next. And the Rabbitohs are missing quite a few players here. Most noteworthy is our man. Well, we got Duncan out, obviously, but our man Lachlan Hubner out suspended for 2 weeks. Justice for Hubner. Duncan is named. I heard during the week he was going to be out, but surprised to see him named. But Lockie Hubner, that one sucks for us because we've got a few issues here with this Rabbitohs team where, Duncan's getting the shot at that starting lock spot. And is he on the bench? So Dodd's on the bench, host there. Okay, no Ewan Aitken yet. All right. I thought Aitken might be back this week. Aitken's probably out back next week. But when Aitken comes back, there's a chance that he goes to the edge back row spot and Jai Arrow goes to lock, which would make things even worse for Lachlan Hubner. So a bit of risk for our boy Lachlan Hubner. I would say, though, with the break even, you still just hold on to him and use him as a loophole. But let's tear into the Sharks team here first. So for Sharks, Will Kennedy, Sam Stonestreet, Jesse Ramian, Kale Iro, and Ronaldo Mulatalo. We've then got Trindle and Hines in the halves. Noteworthy to mention that Hines did have 300 plus kick meters last week. So we saw Hines take over the goal kicking again, doing a lot more general play kicking. And he could be an option where at some point you look at him at a bit of a discount price and you think, yep, you know what? Discount superstar, I could do this. Now, Nico Hines up against the Rabbitohs this week. Look, the Rabbits aren't, defensive juggernauts. They're missing quite a few players. So you could think about Hines. Like if I had Hines, I'd probably think about sticking with him. But the risk is, the tough side is you could possibly sell him for Payne Haas for not much money. So I'm not going to say don't do that. But Nico Hines is someone who's firmly on my radar. For the rest of the back line here, look, Kale Aro pumped out a huge score, 75 points for him. Probably still can't buy him, like 2 tries in that game. He just dominated the Cowboys' edge, which was very fragile. And then for the rest of the back line here, like guys like Mulatalo, Ramian, you look at them when they get cheap, but they're not cheap right now, so I'm not jumping on. For the forward pack here for Cronulla, we got Fanua, Blake, and Kafusi in the front row. Blake Brelly at hooker, Nakora, Wilton, and McInnes in the back row. Then interchange is Atkinson, Talakai, Hamlin Uele, and Howe Tapua. Now, big question here for Ham Man, Cronulla fans. So maybe you should be telling me with the Cronulla display picture. Thoughts on Brayley? For Brayley, he had a decent game last week. Look, I don't see him being enough value to be worth the trade. He was an okay one to start the year with. We talked about him preseason as sort of 5 points of value. So not a bad option, but not enough to make a trade. So I personally wouldn't be jumping on Blake Brayley, but if you have him, enjoy. Wilton or Nicholson? Wilton's actually kind of interesting. We talked about him as a pod preseason, bit expensive, right? So Nicholson's a lot cheaper than Wilton. And I think they're about the same guy in terms of their fantasy production. So Nicholson 100% even with the shorter job security. Then for the rest of the forward pack here, look, if you've got Fanua Blake, that was a gamble, right? That was the risk. We talked about him preseason getting less minutes. He got less minutes and he didn't have the attacking stats last week, so 36 points isn't great. If you could trade Fanua Blake to Haas, you should do it. You should absolutely do it because Fanua Blake has all the downside that Haas has in terms of lower minutes as a prop as opposed to a lock, but without the upside. So Fanua Blake isn't going to pump out those 80s without a try like Payne Haas does. So definitely sell Fanua Blake and get Payne Haas is my answer there. Then look, Nakora is a fun one when he gets cheap at some point. A few of you guys were asking about selling McInnes for Payne Haas. I like that move quite a bit. Any other questions for the Sharkies here? No. Cool. We'll keep on rolling then. For the Rabbits, we've got Jai, Gray, Azaitas. By the way, guys, trade questions, general trade questions, I'll hit those at the end too. So those will be right at the end of the stream. We'll go through those. Yeah, we've got Gray, Tass, Whiten, Graham, Myers. Then we have Walker and Humphreys. Going into the forward pack here, we've got Kepi, Mamazelis, Moale, Kalamatangi, Arrow, Duncan. And on the bench, we've got Sullivan, Havili, LeBlanc, and Totola. So for the South Sydney side, we've got a backline here that is relatively unchanged. We lose, what was his name? Bailey Smith. I can't remember his exact name, but look, Fletcher Meyer moves back out to the wing spot with Whiten coming back into the team. Jamie Humphreys, you have to have him. You have to have him. That 72-point game last week was mostly base stats. It was about 60 in base for him, right? And he had the field goal and the try assist. The fact that he won them the game with the field goal as well, and he was so chill about it, man, he's going to keep that spot. Like, I reckon he's earned that spot now. I know Lewis Dodd's on the extended bench, but as if they're dropping Jamie Humphreys at this point, full steam ahead, you must have Jamie Humphreys. This is the last week to do it, so he is priority number 1 for you in terms of trade-ins. Thoughts on captaining Humphreys? Oh, okay. I just said he was priority number 1, so it's hard for me to say no to this. Look, Cronulla's a pretty good team, right? And if we're going to captain a half, we're going to want some attacking upside. Now, I'm going to preface this with my tip because last week I made some recommendations based on the fact that I thought the Panthers would beat the Roosters and they didn't. So if you're tipping South Sydney come out and beat Cronulla, then Humphries is a good option. But I'm not tipping that. I think Cronulla will get this done. I think they'll clamp up South Sydney quite a bit. South Sydney's attack last week was pretty stale at times as well, I thought. So personally, I wouldn't be captaining Humphries, but his base is really good. So in better matchups, I think he is absolutely a captaincy option. Then can I use Hubner as a loop even after the Rabbits have played? No. So once the Rabbitohs play, Hubner will lock out. So you need to use one of the players that plays prior to lock on Hubner if you want to loophole him. So the key there is your loophole player has to play first, right? So your player in the emergency 5 spot. So if you've got maybe Cole is an option for that, Purdue, one of these guys that we really don't trust, they're the ones I'd be looking at, or even like the Roosters play prior to this game, right? So use one of those Roosters players, like Sandon Smith. Do you think Hubner could be sold this week? You could do it. I mean, he's not that expensive and he's got a good break even. Bennett likes him. I'm going to hold on to him, but if you've got a really good trade for him, then I'm okay with you selling him. And then Jai Gray, an option, 600 meters over 2 games. Crazy. It is absolutely insane. Look, Latrell is back in about 4 weeks, right? And Jai Gray is historically not an insane fantasy scorer. I think Cronulla will put the clamps on a bit here as well. So I personally wouldn't be jumping on Jai Gray. I think he's a bit too expensive for what he is. I'd rather wait on one of these better fullbacks who's getting a bit cheaper. So Keanu Keeney's dropping in price. Brimson, he's dropping a bit in price as well. Reece Walsh is getting cheaper. I'd wait for one of those guys and jump on them instead. And then Kepi, a buy. Oh, this is so much easier with you here, Monty, by the way. Look, Sean Kepi, 60 plus minutes last week, 60 plus points, grabbed a try. Is he going to do that every week? Probably not. I mean, this bench is better for him. Like the fact that they have the injuries they have is definitely better for him. The concern for him is Ewan Aitken is due back in round 4. So Aitken comes back next week. Jai Arrow moves back into the middle forward rotation. That will hurt Kepi, and probably not Moale, but Kepi in particular. Moale was already playing quite low minutes, so he will stay about the same, but Kepi's going to cop it. So I wouldn't be jumping on Kepi. Then Jai Gray on the verge for Dally M. Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, look, there's a few people talking about the fact that he should be the starting fullback over Latrell Mitchell, even when Latrell's back. I think it's totally insane. Like everyone's forgetting how good Latrell is. So, look, Jai Gray, he's awesome. He's a great player. He goes hard. He should be a starter at some club, 100%. Like if Parramatta looked at him, I wouldn't hate that. But he's not going to play over Latrell. So yeah, skip. For the rest of the team here, look, I want to talk about Marmazelis just briefly. So I think Marmazelis, he was one who in the preseason we talked about him and we said, you know what, he's got a great fantasy resume, very good scorer, about a 50 average when he plays big minutes. He's a guy who has pretty good job security, at least for the meantime. And the on-field performances weren't inspiring last year. He came out this week and he had a great game in a very close game too. So he wasn't scoring consolation tries. He set up some big plays and sort of struck some blows in this game and helped South Sydney win. So I think Marmazelis, his job security has increased, his minute security has increased, and the fact that Dodd isn't straight back in sort of shows you that he's going to keep that big minute role, and Sullivan will be a small minute player. You also throw in the fact that last week when there were injuries in the back line, Sullivan slid out into the back line. So he is also that utility cover, which is even better for Marmazelis. So personally, I said it last week, but I'm going to say it again. Marmazelis should be in your 17 every week. He's a safe hooker. He makes a ton of tackles, and he has a little bit of attacking upside now that we've seen that too. So, yeah, he's pretty safe for about 40 points a week is what I've got him penciled in for. For the rest of the team here, look, I wouldn't be buying Jai Arrow. Koloamatangi, he scored like a 28, I believe, in that game last week. So he's going to get nice and cheap. But overall, we're not targeting too many of these South players except for Jamie Humphries, the man, the myth, and the legend. Now, going to jump to the next game here. And remember, guys, we'll do all those trade questions too. So a lot of those have been starred as well. So we'll come back to them too. But those big trade questions that you've got, they're going to be at the end of the video as well. So jumping into this game here, Dolphins v Tigers. Look, Dolphins have had a rough start this year. They looked hopelessly outmatched by the Knights last week. And the Tigers, they played one of the worst 30 minutes of footy to start the game and then absolutely tore Parramatta to shreds after that. I don't know how much we can read into it because Parramatta are... I'm not going to finish the sentence. They're just dreadful. They're dreadful. But yeah, the Tigers were good last week. The Dolphins will be looking to bounce back. I think this should be a pretty good game of footy. So for the Dolphins here, we got the hammer at fullback. We have Asako, Avarillo, Farmworth, and Tupou. Then we have Nikarima and Katoa in the halves. So very similar to last week. Then Safidi, Marshall King, Felice Kafusi at prop, Oren Keeley, Max Plath, Tom Gilbert in the back row. And then we got Donahue, Kerr, Nichols, and Stone. Curious to see, because I thought we might see Finafuyaki come back into the team. O'Sullivan, Fenoi, Bromwich, Bostock, and all right, here we go. So we may see Finafuyaki come back into the team. I wouldn't be surprised if that's a change later on. Just keep an eye on that. And Jack Bostock as well. He's the preferred winger over Junior Tupou. So we may see Bostock come back in too. If they do come back in, then, ideally for us, by the way, it's Finafuyaki back in off the bench and he slowly warms back into it, gets nice and cheap for us. That would be ideal. But yeah, Finafuyaki, a few of you guys have held on to him. I'd stick with him. I think he comes back into the team this week. I'd be surprised if he's not starting in the back row because in round one, he was one of the best players for the Dolphins. Now, for them, look, you could make a case for a few guys here. So Herbie Farmworth, he's been pumping out big numbers, even with the losing sort of record there. Not someone I'm targeting because he isn't really value. Hammer, I had a bit of a look at him after round one. I thought he was kind of interesting, but round two wasn't that great for him. So again, not really jumping on there. Isaiah Katoa is probably one that we got to think about. Now, for Katoa, pumped out a 70-plus score last week. A lot of kick meters, a lot of run meters for him too. Had the try. He's looking better and better. Just a bit of an awkward price. Like I can't bring myself to do it, but at some point, I think he will sort of make that leap into a higher end half. I just don't think there's enough money in it. And I think we have too many halves. So I'm personally going to say skip Isaiah Katoa. And then in the forward pack here, look, Marshall King's interesting if he's playing 80 minutes, but he isn't really. Like Kurt Donahue's coming on. Oren Keeley, it's a very temporary role, so I wouldn't be jumping on him. Max Plath, playing on the edge is not ideal for him. Probably going to say you should consider selling Max Plath if you have him. He's just a bit expensive for what you're getting there. And then Gilbert, is he still a buy? Gilbert's fine. So Gilbert's exactly who he was last week. He's just a bit more expensive now. We sort of penciled him in as that 50 average, right? So he's gone 65, 43. So he's pumping out, what's that? 65 plus 43. It's like a 108. So 54 average, right? So low 50s. We said 50 to 52. I think it'll still regress back to that 50 to 52 mark. For Gilbert, he's safe. He's dual position. He should make you a bit of money. I wouldn't be selling Seyfarth for him or breaking your team for him, but he is a very solid option. So I don't mind Gilbert at all. I was a bit worried about the minutes last week, but I hope that bounces back this week because he was one of their better players. Any other Dolphins questions for us come through? Easy. All right, cool, guys. If you want your question featured, by the way, ask the question about the team that's on the screen. That's the way you guarantee your question to pop up on the screen. Also, any interesting ones that come through, feel free to fire them as well. But yeah, for the Tigers here, we've got Bulla, Taruva, Dwayhe, Toa, Skelton. Then we have Lockie Galvin and Jerome Luai. For the back line here, I want to talk about this a bit because Bulla potentially under an injury cloud for this game. Just keep an eye on that. Taruva and Skelton, I'd need to see the Tigers attack really prove it. Like they're just a bit expensive and you're sort of relying on them having very good attacking output, which absolutely happened last week. Taruva grabbed the hat trick, but in general, I'm a bit worried about that. Good question here from Breaking Sydney. What's Toa's job security look like? The start for Toa, he played great in that game last week. He played really well. That earns him a bit of time in that starting spot. My concern here is there's a bit of talk they're going to sign Taylor May. If they haven't signed Taylor May by the end of the week, you could get on Stafford Toa. It just is a gamble because if they do sign Taylor May, he'll come in pretty quickly into that center spot, and I expect he'd take Toa's spot. Now, Toa would then be the first reserve, right? So if there's an injury to Taruva, Dwayhe, who gets hurt pretty frequently as well, or Skelton, then he might come in, but it's risky. I don't mind Stafford Toa, though. I think last week was a big score for him, though. I would pencil him in for more like a 30 average in general. I think that's sort of who he is. And then is Dwayhe a buy? Only if he played in the halves. That would be the only scenario. So if they had an injury to the halves and he moved into the halves, I'd be interested. But at center, production was good last week. Parramatta were really bad. In general, I would ignore him. Jumping into the forward pack here, we've got Terrell May, Coruscant, Pole, Fainu, Seyfarth, Twal. Then we go to De Silva, Hunt, Bird, and Fainu. And Jack Bird's still sitting on the bench there. Look, Terrell May, what a man. What a man. 65 minutes straight in that game. Captain for the Whale Rider. Ooh. You could do it. You could definitely do it. You could do worse than Terrell May. Like he'll pump out 60 plus points for you in 65 minutes. The attacking upside is the big question there. So you kind of want him to, pop off for an attacking play to be in that 80 plus area, but he absolutely can do that as well. I'm keen to see this week because Coruscant didn't play big minutes last week. He was coming back from, a bit of an extended layoff and it was a hot game as well. So maybe Coruscant and May combine a bit more this week. I want to see them making a few plays before I jumped on Terrell May as captain, but he is a very solid option and I don't mind it against the Dolphins. Is Seyfarth a sell? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Seyfarth is a whole. Seyfarth is a borderline buy right now. Actually, like I look at Seyfarth at that price, and I'm considering it. If I'm being transparent, like 467K, he'll pump out sort of a mid to high 40s average. And last week he pumped out a 43 in pure base stats, no attacking stats. Played 80 minutes. Seyfarth is fine. They won the game. He's good. Is Bird a hold or a sell? The answer to that question will depend on your team. So if you have two Newcastle Knights players in your backline, then you probably need to hold Bird. But if you don't have that, then you can probably sell him. Just keep an eye on next week. So if you need the cover for next week, I'd hold Bird. I still think Bird's a guy who's on my radar all year, basically. As soon as he gets that big minute lock roll, even if it's off the bench, that's when I'll be interested. But last week, I mean, he came off a bit early. He had the ice on the knees. So if you can sell him for someone good, I don't mind that either. Thoughts on Twal? Is he worth trading out? Twal's been all right. He's been going pretty good. He's roughly a PPM guy. I wouldn't be desperate to sell him, but if you have a really good trade you can make and you can get to Payne Haas, something like that, then you can make a sell there. Luai SL, I don't like the role that Luai is playing for fantasy this year. So Jerome Luai is coming in and he's sort of playing that more distributing halfback role. We saw Jaden Campbell do the same thing. We've seen Duffy do the same thing. I think the coaches in general will sort of lean towards giving a simpler role to someone who's new to that 7 spot and adding the attack as they go on. So my answer with Luai is at some point the attack will come back, the running game will come back, and the meters will come back. It's just a case of, are you patient enough to wait for it? I'd probably sell Luai. I think it's going to take a little bit of time. Like he could easily come out and tear this game apart against the Dolphins, though. That's the one thing. I'm picking a bounce back, but I still think he's probably a sell. Like on balance probabilities, he's a sell, but he could easily bounce back. Goat Fart to get 2 tries this week up against Plath or Keeley. Yeah, maybe. It's a possibility. Look, Seyfarth does score a try here and there, so I don't hate that. For the rest of the team here, though, look, Lockie Galvin had a good game, but probably not targeting him. Coruscant's on my watch list. So Coruscant scored 24 on the weekend. He'll get nice and cheap. He'll be an option that we can consider. Some of the Finu had some good runs in that game too. Royce Hunt should be out of your teams. Talon De Silva should be not in anyone's team either. But overall, that's the Tigers there. Then we'll jump into the next game here. So jumping into Sunday, or still Saturday, sorry. Saturday night footy. Titans and the Knights. And for this game, I'm excited to watch this one. I reckon this should be good. So the Titans, they got absolutely destroyed by the Dogs the other day. They're down 22-0. Dogs had a few injuries, kick out. Burton was injured early as well. And the Titans got back into the game as a result of that. Now, I was shocked by the way the Titans played because I love this Titans team. I think it's a fantastic roster. I think they've got one of the better forward packs on paper that I've seen in recent years. And they've got a lot of strike in the back line. So my thinking with the Titans is they're going to rock up, they're going to run hard, and they're going to blow through the middle of this team. And then when there's a bit of fatigue, we're going to see Jaden Campbell, AJ Brimson, Keanu Keeney just be too hard to contain. What we saw was not that. We saw them come out and I know they were trying to play cute. They were doing these different things, and they got blown off the park by a much smaller Bulldogs pack, which really shocked me. So I think they'll come back and they'll have that figured out now. But what is perplexing is Dave Fafita on the bench. So let's go through the team list here. For the Titans here, we got Keeney. Then we have Francis on the wing with Jojo Fafita, Kelly and Sami at the center spots. So no Calm Pereira is interesting. I'm keen to see sort of what his injury is. For the forward pack, we got Fodawaker and Campbell Gillard, Sam Verrills at hooker, Cleese Haas, Bo Firma, and Tino Fatmasulali. And then on the bench, we have Randall, Fafita, and I can't see behind Gray, and someone else there too. So thoughts on Firma? Bo Firma is exactly the same as what I thought he was preseason, right? So I wouldn't be skewed by the big score. What I would say about Firma is he's a low 50s average, like a 50 to 52. He's pretty pricey for what he is. So he's priced pretty much at full price. I don't mind him as an option. I think he's a great player, but he's not value. So I wouldn't tear your team apart to go get him. Like he's going to be around this price for most of the year. So don't stress too much. Thoughts on Campbell? Campbell owner here. So hand up on that one. 44 points last week. Pure base. pure base, didn't have basically any attacking stats, didn't really run the ball until about the last 20 minutes either. It felt to me, and I talked about this before with Luai, it felt to me that Campbell was doing the same thing. So he was playing that really pure 7 role, not getting his hands on the ball until the last tackle where he would put in the kick. Now, as he got comfortable at the end, he started running the ball. So I'm really encouraged by that. And I think he'll do it this week. But what I will say is there was a few times where the Titans made line breaks, and you'd think after a line break, that's when the defense is fragmented. That's when you'd want Campbell to have the ball in first receiver. And he was sort of standing behind guys, letting them take it, letting forwards take a hit up. That's where I want to see Campbell really going after the attack. And the Titans aren't going to win games unless he does do that. So I'm confident it's going to happen. So yeah, my answer for Campbell is 44 in base is fine. He's going to have those big explosion games. We are so good with Campbell. Like he is going to be absolutely fine. Firmly a hold in my team. Brimo, a hold or sell. Brimson nearly had a try in that game. Like he just dropped the ball when he was putting it down. So you take that 32, you add try, line break, couple of tackle breaks. You're looking at, a 16-point injection of points. That's a 48-point game, nearly 50. He's fine. He missed a bunch of tackles in this one, but I would hold on to Brimson. And personally, I'm actually keeping my eyes on him as a potential buy. Francis a buy with Loffy out with hamstring. Okay, so it's a hammy for Camprera. Potentially. I mean, what's the price on Francis? He base price? I think he might be base price. Could be an option there. The Titans do feed their wingers. I'll look at him in the cheapy video as well. So we'll tear into him too. And then for the rest of this Titans team, look, Sam Verrills is interesting in draft leagues. I can't believe Dave Fafita's on the bench. Like what this is it's outrageous in terms of the way teams running. In fact, I'll hit this question here too. Thoughts on why he's playing for 30 minutes. I reckon Des thinks he's lazy. I mean, it has to be something like that, right? Like, can't put words in Dez's mouth, but it's looking like it might be something like that. For Fafita, it's not the worst thing in the world for us as fantasy coaches, because what it means is, he dropped 43K last week. He'll drop another 50K this week. He's just going to get nice and cheap. And then at some point, Des is going to be like, you know what? Maybe I will put one of the best back rowers in the game in my starting team. Maybe I'll do that. And he'll jump back in, he'll play close to 80 minutes, and he'll pump out a 60 average. So Dave Fafita, just enjoy watching this because he's going to get nice and cheap and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And then we're all going to be buying him 100%. Also, he doesn't make origin teams, so that's even better through the origin period. Is Tino a pod? 75 points last week, included a big line break try. You take that down to about a sort of 60, maybe a 55 if you take that out. Still a bit of value there at 700, low 700K area. Tino is a pod you could look into 100%. He's going to have to carry this team on his back. And he's got a bit more support through the middle. So I think with that, we're going to see more attacking stats from him. I like the way he played last week. And if you want to get him, go get him. But I would say if you can, go get Payne Haas instead because he is on another level. Tino scored a try to get 75. Payne Haas got 85 without any tries at all. For the rest of the Titans team, there's probably no one else we're really looking at here. I will say Regan Campbell-Gillard scored a 14 last week. Absolutely shameful for fantasy, but he's going to be a guy who gets nice and cheap, so we might target him at some point as well if he gets cheap enough. For the Knights here, we got Ponga at fullback. We got the back line of Schiller, Gagai at best, and Mazu. Our boy Mazu absolutely killing it. And obviously Best and Ponga killing it as well. Then Fletcher Sharp, who's on fire. I can't ignore him anymore. And Jack Cogger in the halves. So big question here, is Sharp worth picking up? With the buy in round 4, I'm going to say no to basically every Newcastle acquisition. I reckon it's tricky to do. Like just before a buy, do you really want to buy a guy? Titans matchup is very, very good. Like they're a team who weren't defending well last week. So you can make a case for Sharp. I think he'll go well this week. But my advice is generally to steer clear of guys who have a buy the following week. So if you really like Sharp, you can do it. But generally, it's probably a no. For the other guys here, look, I wouldn't be loading up on more than 2 Newcastle players, by the way. So if you have 1 Newcastle player so far or 0, you can make a buy there. If you already have 2 Knights players, you need to wait till after the buy because we're going to be missing 2 of them next week. You probably have a few guys like Hubner, Duffy popping up and missing games as well. So you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you have like 16 men instead of 17 because you've got too many Knights players. So just keep an eye on that, guys. Also, if you're selling guys like Yongi, Purdue, these sort of outside backs, again, they're your cover at wing fullback and at center. So I'm personally holding on to Yongi 100%. For the Knights here, though, look, they're all good targets. So after their buy, Ponga is a great target. I think Best is always fun. Mazu, his offload increase has been insane this year, and Fletcher Sharp could be an option too. Then in the forward pack, look, Safidi, Crossland, Jones are not super interesting, but Dylan Lucas is. He's killing it as well. And then Frizzell back to the edge, Adam Elliott at lock. Elliott is probably available in your draft league if you play draft, so he's a good one to jump onto. And here, Dan as well. Is Elliott a buy or a watch? Just a watch at this stage. I'm not convinced. Kai Pierce-Paul, he'll be back in 2 games as well. I mean, it's 3 weeks because they have the bye, but 2 games. So that'll push Frizzell back to lock. Maybe Frizzell will play off the bench, but Elliott's minutes are not consistent enough for me to jump onto. Reckon Lucas is still buy if you don't have him. I wouldn't do it before the bye round, but I do think he'll tear up in this game. So if you want to do it, I happily have him in my side. He's almost a captain option. He's not a captain option, but he's almost a captain option the way he's playing right now. He's absolutely killing it, but I wouldn't captain him. Then, for the rest of the forward pack here, not super interested. I mean, Crossland was minor value, but not really. Brayley, Hetherington, Kent, Croker aren't really interesting either. Any other questions you want to pop up here? Cool. Let's keep rolling through into the Sunday games, and then we'll do some trade questions as well. So Sunday, we got the Eels, and we can skip the Eels. No, I'm kidding. We'll talk about the Eels, unfortunately. So Parramatta, they're my boys. I'm loyal. I'll never swap teams. But I'll tell you what, it's tough. And cheers, Roman. Just saw that pop through. Appreciate that. But for the Eels here, we got Yongi, Russell, Panasini, Lomax, Samrani in. And then we have Brown and Hawkins in the halves. Offa Hangawi, Hands, Junior Paulo, Sean Lane, Jack Williams, Jermaine Hopgood, Riley Smith on the bench with Dury, Kautonga, and Tuavidi. This is pretty much the team list from last week, right? So I just want to have a quick look at the extended bench because maybe it's just a lazy team naming. Josh Papali's there. Here we go. Josh Adokar in jersey 21. Ryan Madison as well could come back in. I would be shocked if Ryan Madison doesn't come back into the team. So, I mean, here's my prediction for Parramatta. I personally think that we're going to see this team not be the team that runs out on the weekend. Now, if it was my team and I was running it, I'd probably bring Madison in on the edge and move Sean Lane back to the bench. And I'd probably bring Adokar in for Adokar in for Sean Russell and leave Samrani in the team. It's a late game. So when we talk about Samrani as a cheapie, it's probably a bit too late to take a gamble on Samrani. He could get dropped out of the team. Bailey Simonson's back soon as well, but I do like Samrani's production. So if you really think he'll keep a spot, you could look at it. I'm not confident in that. So I can't bring myself to do it. Hawkins is interesting. I'm just trying to think what Hawkins' price is. I might just check that right now. But Hawkins should have a decent stint in the team here. So Moses is now out till about round 9 is what I'm hearing, and it could be longer. It just seems to be extending all the time. 444K for Hawkins, probably too expensive, so I'm going to skip him. Dylan Brown is one to avoid pretty firmly, but at some point he'll fluke a few attacking plays. Is Yongi a sell or hold? It's probably a hold. Just looking at your roster, if you've got a few Newcastle players, you're going to need the cover at wing fullback. So I'm holding on to Yongi, but the production hasn't been great. I will say, though, the Dogs are now without Kickow, and they're also without Burton. So we saw the Titans, rack up a few cheap attacking plays in that game last week. Yongi could potentially do that. So I'd stick with him for a bit longer. And do you reckon Kautonga is still a cheapie to get or no? He could potentially slide into the starting side this week. That's one thing to keep in mind. But he could also get dropped completely from the team. It's really a big gamble. I'm not against buying Kautonga because at center, if he's playing 60 minutes in the back row or 80 minutes in the back row, with the way this bench is constructed right now, he could definitely be an interesting option. I will think about it. I'm going to try and get some mail on how team's going to line up on the weekend, and I'll give you a firm answer in buy, hold, sell. Is Hopgood still a good hold? Yeah. The minutes were good. The minutes were good for Hopgood. I think he's still a pretty firm hold, but if you can move him on for Payne Haas or someone who's in a completely different league, I'm not against that whatsoever. But I would say generally, Hopgood, the minutes have been fine. He's been really solid. Then thoughts on Riley Smith. I think it's only a matter of time until he replaces Hands. He's already playing meaningful minutes in the team anyway. So he's already coming on and playing sort of 55 to 60 minutes. He's fine. He's a good cash out. Very cheap option. Covers hooker for you. If you need that hooker cover, he's a good one. He will grow into minutes as the year goes on, and the scores will get better and better as well. If Parramatta can start playing like they're a first grade or even reserve grade level team, then he'll also rack up some attacking stats at some point too. So I'm a fan of Riley Smith as a cash out. The rest of the Para team here, I mean, look, Lomax had a good game last week, but probably not someone to jump onto. Might get cheap at some point. And then, offhand guy, Paulo's getting the minutes. Offhand guy's doing the work. It's pretty hard to read there. Lane Williams. Williams is okay, just a bit too versatile for my liking. And then we'll jump across to, the dogs are probably interesting here. So for the doggies, we got Connor Tracy, we have Wilson and Montoya on the wing spots, Zeri and Crichton at center. Then Hayward gets the 6 jersey and Sexton's in. Now, Matty Burton out for about sort of 1 to 4 weeks. It looks like a mild MCL strain. I would say, it's probably going to be more like 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. That'll be a bit conservative. But that means Hayward gets a starting spot for a little bit. It's not that attractive of a starting spot. Toby Sexton will dominate. If you're in a draft league and Sexton's on the waivers, his kick meters will be fantastic. So not interesting for Supercoach, but as a fantasy player, very interesting. He'll also goal kick too. So look, Sexton's not a bad one. Again, what's Sexton's price? That's something I want to have a look into here. So he is at a price of $493K. Scored a 44 last week, 33 the week before that. It's probably not enough time. The issue with this is you go to Sexton, right? And you got the Eels, the Sharks, and the Knights next 3 games, and you have a bye after that. So even if it's a 4-week injury for Matt Burton, you only get the 3 games from Sexton. Not worth it at that price. If he was $300K, I'd consider it, but at that price, it's a bit too risky. I think he will pump out some big numbers though. So in a draft league, definitely jump on. Then for the forward pack here, we've got King and Curran in the prop spots. We have Reed Marnie at hooker. So Tilly Tupanua gets in, and Jacob Preston, then Jamin Salmon as well. So Tupanua is one that you could definitely consider. Let's just check out that Tupanua price. Curran or Tilly. I would say no to Curran, yes to Tupanua. So Tupanua, $466K. It's pretty risky. Tupanua is about a 40 average when he starts in the back row, I believe. So, this year is not characteristic for him. Also, you've got no Matt Burton there either. So the attacking production of this dog side is not going to be as good. I would say no to Tupanua. I think Matty Nicholson is the much, much better option at that price point. So I'm going to say no to Tupanua, yes to Matty Nicholson. If Burton was still playing, I'd consider Tupanua. Maybe he gets a few of those attacking plays on that edge. But, with Hayward as his half, it's not going to be the sort of silkiest thing in the world. Preston a hold? Absolutely. Yeah, scored 53 last week. He's fine. Played a bit of center in that game as well, which is not ideal for him. But I doubt he goes to center again. He wasn't great there, and guys like Kurt Mann can go and play that position instead. For the rest of the dogs here, nothing really super interesting in the back line. The forward pack, we talked about it a bit. Preston's still good. Jamin Salmon starting at lock is very strange to me, but Kurt Mann's really the primary lock there. And then I'd skip over the rest of the guys there too. So I'm going to jump through to the final game of the round, and then we're going to get into, just make sure it is, final game of the round, and then we're going to talk trade questions. So get your trade questions ready for that last segment. We'll talk about those. But firstly, got the Raiders and the Sea Eagles. So for the Raiders and Sea Eagles, Tommy Turbo, and we're pushing 1,000 people. We've got about 900 right now. Okay, Tommy Turbo at fullback. He's been named. That's good to see. DCE also named. Both of them under an injury cloud last week. Both were cleared by scans. I'm not certain that Turbo plays in this game. I'm just going to put that on record. I think there's a chance that if he's not feeling great, they give him a rest for a week and they bring him back the week after. So just keep that in mind if you're a Turbo owner, but he most likely will play. It's just a tricky one because it is that last game of the round. So make sure you have a wing fullback on your bench. As an example, if you've got Toya and Tamale and one of them's on the bench, one of them's starting, make sure Tamale is the one on the bench because he covers wing fullback as well. So bit of a roster config strategy there. Then for the wing spots, we've got Saab, Liho Hopewadi. At center, we have Kola, who's getting very cheap. Keep an eye on him. And Ruben Garrick, who didn't score great last week. A lot of people are talking about selling. I would stick with him. And then Brooks and Trey Evans in the halves. We have Paseka and Takiaho in the prop spots. Jazz Tavanga at hooker, not scoring well for fantasy at all. Olakwatu, Burbo, and Jake Trbojevic. And then Simpkin, Waddell, Bullimore, Aloe. So in terms of this backline here, I would say there's not too much you want to be targeting. DC and Turbo, both under injury clouds, not really going to go after them. Garrick a buy. Garrick's all right. Garrick's fine. He's about 5 points of value. He is solid enough. He's dual position. I don't mind it, but not someone I'm breaking my team to go get. Then for the forward pack here, Olakwatu scored very lowly last week. And a lot of you guys were talking about Olakwatu. I'll just pop this one up. Is Amole ASL? I would say probably not. Like that game last week wasn't great for him, but Trey Evans is still in the team. Turbo's still in the team. They're going to be the same Manly team that you saw in round one. I think you'd stick with him. But at the same time, again, if you can sell him and make a space for Payne Haas, then I can't tell you not to do that. But You want to try and stick with him. He has the upside as well. The keg, Tommy Talau, 18th man, the man, the myth, the legend. Look, Tommy Talau, he's too good to be our mascot these days. And if Turbo was ruled out, Lehigh Hopewadi probably goes to fullback, and Tommy Talau will go to wing. So that could be interesting. Yeah, look, Tommy Talau, if he gets back in your draft leagues, you should have him already. Your classic team, probably not going to buy him, but we might buy him in our pod team instead. Then for the rest of the team here, look, nothing else I really want to talk about for Manly. So I'm going to jump across to Canberra, and then I'll do some of those trade questions as well. So for Canberra, KO Wiggs at fullback, he has been a disaster for fantasy so far. Savelio Tamale and Xavier Savage on the wings. Good to see Tamale held that spot over Hopewadi. Tomoko and Chris at center spots, Strange and Fogarty. Then we have Papali'i, Starling, Horsburgh, Young, Matty Nicholson, Smithies, Paddy, Sasangi, Mooney, and Mariota. So for Canberra, pretty much what we expected here. Look, Tamale is a guy you should plug into your 17 every week. He's got big upside. He was quiet last week for a lot of that game and did save his score with some attacking plays, but I still just like the way he plays footy. I think more often than not, you're going to get a good score out of him, and you have that potential for a boom game as well. So I'm a big Tamale fan. He shouldn't be in the emergency section of your team at any point. I think he's a guy you plug into your 17 consistently. And yeah, for Shaden, 100%. He is not, I think he's a level above that conversation of do you start or bench them? I've got him way ahead of Sandon Smith, for example, and I rate Sandon Smith now after last week, but he's one of those guys that you think about, whereas, Tamale and Toya, they're pretty rock solid. Tamale or Yongi in the 17, definitely Tamale over Yongi, 100%. And then Matt Tomoko, we'll shout out here. He's been killing it as a pod. Here we go. Tomoko, the pod. Good timing. Yeah, look, Tomoko, we talked about him preseason as a pod and as being a guy who can pump out that sort of high 40s average. It's a bit late now. It's a bit late. He's a bit expensive now. Yeah, you kind of want to get on these guys before they go on these runs. I'm not against the Tomoko pod, but personally, I would say it's a bit too late to jump on that. Ethan Strange scored a 10 last week, by the way, so I'm keeping an eye on his price. Fogarty's been motoring as well. Horsburgh still a buy. The concern for Horsburgh, in fact, Tarpanay's out for 2 weeks, hey? Yeah, look, the concern for Horsburgh is while Tarpanay's out, he plays the traditional prop role. So last week we saw him play 52 minutes, scored 57 points, but had the try assist in there as well. He's not going to be the same guy when he plays prop. What we want is him to go back to lock like he was playing in round one, where he played bigger minutes. That's where we're really trusting him. So you can buy Horsburgh 100%. He's a very solid option, but I would just temper expectations this round and increase them again when Tarpanay's back. And it's kind of counterproductive to say that Tarpanay coming back helps Horsburgh, but it really does because he moves into that lock role instead. Starling a pod, again, a bit late. He's a bit expensive now. He definitely has some risk to him. Owen Paddy is the guy they see as the future hooker, so he might steal more and more minutes. I don't hate Starling as a pod, but I think you're a bit too late. Is Matty Nicholson a buy? Break even 2? Yeah, Matty Nicholson, 100%. So I'm going to be bringing Matty Nicholson into my team. A lot of you guys have Hosking in your team. Hosking was a good option. You just got hurt. That's a rough go. Hosking to Matty Nicholson frees up a bunch of cash for you, and then you can make moves elsewhere to upgrade other players. So yeah, big fan of that. Sasangi, a watch with dual position. Just doesn't get the minutes. He's behind Nicholson. Hosking will come back at some point. He'll be behind him too. So I would say pretty firmly no to Sasangi. He's not a guy I'm targeting. And then Iongi to Tamale. Yeah, I don't mind that. Look, Tamale, if I'm not for trading out all your wing fullbacks and centers, those cheapies, because you need the cover. But if you're trading to Tamale, that's a great move. Look, Tamale's going to make cash. He's going to be a good option. The rest of the Raiders team, though, look, I mean, Hudson Young, he goes. We always see him pop up with big scores. But other than that, Owen Paddy didn't play big minutes last week, played less minutes, so I wouldn't be targeting him. I think if you're going for one of those cheapy hookers, it's going to be Riley Smith over Owen Paddy. Now, let's see some questions here. What have we got coming through? So trade questions, hit some of those, and we'll jump across to filming. Hey, Longy from Roman. How you doing, Roman? Sorry if you answer this or not. What do you reckon if I sell Hosking for nickels, then go Harry Grant to Payne? Thanks for the videos. Really love the content. You're my favorite. Cheers, mate. Appreciate it. So for this trade, I think it's reasonable. I think it's a reasonable trade. I would try to find another way to get Payne Haas, but that trade's fine. You've probably got a bit of spare cash to make that work. I'm for that trade. But I would say Harry Grant generally is a hold, but Payne Haas is on a generational run right now. So maybe you have to do this. Don't mind that at all. You can do that trade. Garrick to Firma from the spare cash Hosking to Marty. So Hosky to Matty Nicholson and then Garrick to Firma. It's an upgrade, right? So Firma is about 5 points better than Garrick, I would say. Garrick is sort of that high 40s. Firma's that low 50s. Yeah. Yeah, I don't mind this trade. Decent option. It's a little bit sideways. I'd probably find another thing to use the cash on, but it's a decent trade. Hosking and Barnett for Tino and Nicholson. Yeah. If you believe in Tino, I don't mind this. If you're a big Tino believer, but you need probably a few attacking stats for Tino to be worth it, which he's totally capable of. Hey, Longy, thoughts on Jack Bird and Zach Hosking to Tino and Jesse Arthurs? Jesse Arthurs is a hard one because great break even. He's in form. They've got good fixtures. They're feeding him good ball. But historically, he's not a great fantasy scorer. So you're kind of relying on him scoring tries every week. He could do that. He could absolutely go and score tries every week. But personally, it's just a gamble you don't want to take because we saw Shibasaki last week, come out and score very low. We saw Reece Walsh score -2 in this Broncos side. Jesse Arthurs will have his quiet games as well. So personally, I'm not a Jesse Arthurs guy. But if you think that he's that guy, I'm not going to say don't do it, right? But I personally am not chasing Jesse Arthurs whatsoever. Hosking to Horsburgh or Nicholson? Probably Nicholson for the value, but Horsburgh's not that expensive. Horsburgh's a guy you're going to hold on to for a while. I'm going to say Horsburgh, actually. I think Horsburgh is a bit of a pseudo keeper. Maybe not quite that keeper level, but if he goes back to Lockie is. So I'd probably go Horsburgh over Nicholson. Yeah. Munster and Hosking for Haas and Marky Mark. You're kind of forcing it here. Don't have any other wing fullback cover for Knights by next week or any other wing fullback below 400k. I guess it does cover you at wing fullback. I'm not the biggest Mark Noini Tuase fan in terms of fantasy production. I don't think he's an absolute beast. And as much as the Roosters beat Penrith last week, they're not a team I'm penciling in for big scores this year. So personally, I'm going to say no to this trade. I think Munster is a pretty firm hold. And I think you can find another way to make a trade instead. I'd probably rather go for a real cheapie instead of Mark Noini Tuase as well, and then make the trade work elsewhere. Duffy and White to Nicholson and Riley Smith. Or save the trade. I mean, you don't need to sell White yet, but White will fade in minutes, so I don't hate it completely. I think you can do better than these trades. They're okay trades. It's like a 5 or 6 out of 10 is my answer there. I would look for another trade. That's my advice there. Hey, Yongi, thoughts? Oh, Longy. Thoughts on Hopgood to Nicholson and Duffy to Humphreys? Hopgood to Nicholson, Duffy to Humphreys. Look, these are an upgrade, right? So I'm against selling Hopgood in general, but these two trades do upgrade your team quite a bit because you need to get Humphreys. And if this is the way you can do it, then I'm not completely against it. My concern there is that you're selling a keeper in Hopgood. So I try to find another way to do it. But if this is the only way you can do it, then I'm gonna say yes. 6 out of 10 kind of trades. They're pretty solid. AFB to May and Seyfarth to Humphreys. AFB to May is you have to have Terrell May. So yes to that. And then Seyfarth to Humphreys. Seyfarth is a guy I'd rather keep personally. I think he's one you want to keep. But if that's the only way you can get to Humphreys, then go and do it. Yeah. I'll say okay. Yeah. Yes to that. It's like an 8 out of 10. And are you bringing Haas in this week, Longy? It's tough for me. I've played around with a few trades. It's very difficult for me to find a way to get Payne Haas. So I probably can't do it, but I will look at thinking about it. Could you hop around? Just turn the light back on. There we go. Would you trade Seyfarth or Gilbert to Nicholson? Of those two, probably Seyfarth, but the answer is no. So Seyfarth, I'm penciling him for a sort of high 40s average. Gilbert, low 50s. Nicholson, maybe 50, maybe around the same mark. No, I wouldn't trade those two for Nicholson. No, I wouldn't make that move. Duffy to Savage. Savage is a pod, right? So you're making a bet on some attacking stats from him. He looked really good in round one. He was offloading, breaking tackles, running a lot of meters. I'm not against it, but it's a gamble. And, Savage historically has not been a great fantasy scorer, but he does score more tries when Canberra are firing, and they're firing right now. So I'm not against it, but it's not the move I'd make. Barney and Yo to Nicholson and Haas with 150k in the bank. No, Not really, not really. So, I mean, yes and no. It's not the worst pair of trades, but you got to look at it. You got to look at it from the perspective of what you're selling and what you're buying here. So Barnett and Yo, on paper, are keepers, right? And you're buying Nicholson, who's a rental, and Haas, who's a keeper. So you're selling two keepers, and you're getting one keeper back, which is a roster downgrade. So I would find another way to do it. I would look to sell Barnett to Haas, and then make a second trade where you sell someone for someone cheaper. But keep Yo. Try to have Yo and Haas. But we're going to do a video on Yo versus Haas later today as well. So that's going to come out tomorrow. That will tell you a lot about that sort of trade there. Then we'll hit about 5 more questions here, and then we're going to jump off and record. So what do I prioritize? Selling Duffy for Metcalf, even though I have enough players for my interchange? Or do I sell Udo and bring in a better mid like Tino? I think I'd prioritize getting Vital Kamanu out and getting a better middle forward there. Yeah, I would say the second option there, Dante. And then Harry Grant to Watson, is it worth it? I don't think so. They're priced pretty similarly. I think they'll average relatively similar as well. So, look, as much as Watson's on fire right now, and while the Roosters are under strength, he's really good. They're coming back to full strength. He will fade back into being sort of a 57 average, is my expectation. He's priced at 54. Harry Grant's priced at about 54 as well. I wouldn't do this trade. Thoughts on Tuipulotu? This is such a hard one to answer. The Dragons have lost both their games to start the year, but Tuipulotu's been on fire. Big celebrations when they're down by 20. It's pretty funny. Look, I like him as a player. He's a tackle buster, can score a try, really good footballer. Bit expensive now. He's made a lot of cash. He's 100K up. You're relying on him scoring a bunch more tries, which outside of Valentine Holmes is possible. It's a real pod play. So if you're a big believer in St. George, you like their fixtures, after this round, because they got the bye this week. But for round 4, I'm not totally against Tuipulotu, but he's not someone I'm targeting. Kind of similar to Jesse Arthurs. I think he's a bit better than Jesse Arthurs, but he's also a bit more expensive. And Hosking to Yo, Bird to Riley Smith to help with cash. Hosking to Yo, so you're buying Yo after that. I would wait a couple of weeks on buying Yo. So with Yo, he's going to drop some cash. Give him like 2 weeks, and he'll be nice and cheap, and then we'll all be talking about buying Isaiah Yo. But yeah, Bird to Riley Smith. I would go back to the drawing board and do something else. Personally, I'd probably go Hosking to Matty Nicholson and then looking at selling Bird to someone better instead. Maybe to Seyfarth, for example. I know people are talking about selling Seyfarth, but I think he's a solid option. And then 2 more questions. Do I sell Garrick and Plath for Big Tino and Pappenhausen? It's not the worst pair of trades. Can you just do Plath to Tino? Like, if you could just do that, I would just do that one trade and keep Garrick. I think Garrick's better than Pappenhausen. And he's also dual position. So Garrick over Pappenhausen. I do Plath to Tino. I'm for that, and then try and find another trade instead to free up cash. And then final question, big pressure on which one you choose here. Thoughts on Edwards to Campbell? Campbell, look, I'm a Campbell owner. I'm a Campbell believer. I think he'll be great this year. 44 in base last week. I'm not concerned at all. Would I buy him this week? There's not a lot of wing fullbacks that you really want to target. So, yeah, I'm not against this, but you got to be ready for the fact that you're making a bet on him picking up the attacking game, because last week it was not there, right? So that's what we're relying on, him building up that running game, picking up that attacking game, and absolutely dominating. I think he's going to do it, so I don't mind this trade, but you've got to make sure you're across the fact that you're making that bet as well. Anyway, that is us done and dusted for today. Cheers for jumping on, Monty. But yeah, that's Team List Tuesday. So guys, jump into Buy, Hold, Sell. Buy, Hold, Sell. It's on at 7 a.m. tomorrow. We're releasing a stat breakdown analysis of Payne Haas versus Isaiah Yo as well. It'll be about a 10-minute video, but it's a must watch because you get into the sort of nitty gritty and behind the scenes of what goes on there too. Otherwise, keep an eye out, and I'll see you guys on this video next week. Best of luck with your fantasy sides. Make those trades, trade hard, use 2 trades this week. Let's get into it. Cheers, guys. And I'll see you on the next one.